Hello people of the internet, welcome to episode 56 of Paint to Life, the YouTube channel where we take tiny plastic miniatures, throw some acrylic paint on them, and breathe life into them with storytelling so you might learn something new on the subject or take the story to make it your own. The D&D campaign Ravenloft is one of my favorite places to play the game. It's a gritty, gothic, atmospheric world that provides sensational role-playing opportunities if the players and the DM have the right convictions. I've been playing since 3rd edition. Now, Curse of Strahd is a great campaign. I played it a couple years ago with my group. And now with the release of Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft last month, D&D has brought Ravenloft kind of back into the spotlight. So, using this new sourcebook, I've created my very own Darklord. So let's paint it to life. I'm Atank. Let's get painting. Alright. If you missed our last episode with Suhltar the Orc Chieftain, the swap mini from Heroes and Beasts, you can find the link in the description below or at the end of the video if you want to check it out. Now, in Ravenloft, there exist domains. It's a finite location. It could be as large as a continent or as small as a room. They're all connected, but there are thick layers of mist between them that inhibit free comings and goings of almost all creatures. Think of them like a bunch of grapes all dangling on a vine. Each grape is a single domain, and each domain is ruled by a Darklord. Now, each of these domains is also a prison for that Darklord. They are unable to leave no matter what, and whatever awful, terrible deed found them put in this place can't be rectified either. They're corrupt beyond redemption, and no solace can be found by them. Chapter 2 of this book guides you through the creation of your own Darklord and its subsequent domain of dread. What was their past life like? What kind of personality did they hold, or do they hold now? What evil act was so atrocious to draw the attention of the dark powers to craft the perfect prison domain for that Darklord? Some Darklords are monstrously deformed. Some look like everyday people. But while they are prisoners, do not mistake the power that each Darklord has over their domain. They have complete control over it. They have control over the weather, certain magics, almost all of the animals, and they are not to be trifled with. However, should you find yourself in a domain of dread, well, negotiating or defeating that Darklord may be your only chance of escape, if you can even find out who they are. Which leads me to ask, who is the Darklord that I've come up with? Well, let me tell you about the bronze dragon Astropothegon. Astropothegon was over 700 years old. He was sort of a detective over his many centuries of existence. He excelled at bringing justice to the world and solving mysteries, and this was a good one. In the chilly northern waters of the Silver Marches, the small frontier island port town known as Walker's Landing had completely disappeared without a trace. Friends and relatives of the missing appealed to Astropothegon to discover the fate of the Walker's Landing people. He visited the site of the town. There was nothing there left but old foundations. In the harbor, the great reptile dove down into the dark depths and found something. A wooden vessel sunk with its sails unfurled, with a massive blackened charred hole in its side. He came ashore and saw a thick bank of fog rolling in a very unusual way. It began to surround him. He beat his large wings to disperse the fog, but it was so thick that anything he pushed away was immediately replaced anew. Completely surrounded, he had no sensation of movement, but as quickly as it appeared, it passed. But he was somewhere else now, somewhere different. The trees and the coast weren't the same. Curious, his massive frame traveled along the water's edge when finally, after an hour, he spotted a settlement with humans mulling about in the distance. Now, not wanting to panic anybody, he transformed his body into that of an old farmer and continued on his way. To his great shock, he strode right past the "Welcome to Walker's Landing" sign. Fields, farmlands, docks and all. Incognito and using his great charisma and charm, Astropothegon determined they were indeed the missing population of Walker's Landing. But how? They said they had been abandoned, alone for months, frantically awaiting the return of the ships from the mainland. Journeying across the island was not an option. Anyone who ventured out into the mists were never seen again. He spoke with Seth Walker, mayor of the town, the sheriff, John Ashley, shipwright, Caleb Ryan, barkeep, Cedric Wallace, fraternal twins Lawrence and Lozen, and the town doctor, Sarah Hopkins. He witnessed an interesting encounter with those three. In the town square, Lawrence was flirting with Sarah, kind of creepily. She rebuked his advances and sharply reminded him she was in a relationship with another, and he was starting to make her feel uncomfortable. When his twin sister, Lozen, tried to comfort her brother with a hug, he struck her and stormed off. Now, none of the townspeople seemed to notice he was an outsider, and all of them just went about their days, content that rescue would come for them sooner or later. So Astropothicon took to the forest and began to explore further. The mists were thick and undeniably spooky to a mere human. Additionally, he was set upon by wolves, but they were no match for a dragon of his power and size. Now, when he was many miles away from Walker's Landing, he found an unusual landmark. A black onyx tower just jutting out of the ground, almost like a wizard's tower, with many mechanical constructs milling about the perimeter. As he approached to investigate, they assembled and looked upon him menacingly, clearly preparing to attack him should he get any closer, so he kept his distance. As day turned to night, he decides to return to Walker's Landing, but he gets turned around. He's way too far south, and suddenly ahead, he sees another town in the distance. Astropothicon used his magic to make himself invisible and approached, and he was shocked. This town, the building, the docks, the fields, was identical to the other town he was in earlier, including the townsfolk. As he wandered around invisibly, trying to make sense of things, he heard a woman cry out in anguish at the edge of town. He found the doctor, Sarah, crying over a man's body who had stab wounds to his chest, and she was fruitlessly trying to bandage this corpse's wounds. Just then, the twins, Lawrence and Lozin, arrived on the scene. Lawrence attempted to comfort Sarah when she spotted fresh blood on his pantaloons. "Murderer," she cried, as she backs away in horror and then turned and ran into the woods. Lawrence cries out in frustration.
"Sarah, why? Sister, I believe she thinks me guilty of this terrible crime. Now she will never have me."
Lozin approaches her brother, embraces him around his chest, and speaks closely to his face.
"Brother, forget about her. I understand how you feel, to love someone, unrequited."
She passionately kisses him on the lips. Appalled, he grabs her by the shoulder, slaps her in the face, and throws her to the ground. Lozin holds her face, trembling, and sobs.
"What are you doing? That's disgusting! Sarah, why?"
he cries as he runs after the doctor into the woods. The invisible bystander Astropothicon pursues and comes across a terrible sight. In a clearing not 300 yards from where they had been, a large black wolf is biting at Sarah's throat. Lawrence fires his flintlock pistol at the beast, which flees. He quickly reloads and prepares for an attack, but does not return. He then tries to staunch the bleeding, but she is mortally wounded. Townspeople with torches come and investigate the cries and the gunshot. Heartbroken and sobbing, Lawrence throws his head to the sky and then shoots himself, shocking all of the onlookers. But now something would happen that would terrify the observing bronze dragon. All of the townspeople present, including those in the distance, began clutching their heads and screaming in agony for approximately 10 seconds. Then they dropped to the ground, dead. Once the last one was no longer screaming, there was deafening silence. The dragon could hear his own heart beating. Suddenly, the silence of the ghoulish scene was broken as constructs, like the ones he saw at the Onyx Tower, began crawling out of tree stumps, from hidden hatches beneath the ground, from the cellars of nearby houses, and began clearing the bodies. Additionally, some of them were carrying what looked like sleeping, naked, hairless humanoid clones of the townspeople, and began placing these clones around town. It was as if they were setting up a board game pieces to begin a new game. Astropothicon had to fly away and share this information. He flew high, but could never seem to break the fog. Finally getting exhausted, he begins to descend and immediately hits the tree line. Despite flying for what seemed like hours, he'd only been up 100 feet, and he's not very far from where he took off. The great bronze dragon now realizes that he is trapped. He's trapped in a place he's heard of before, a place of evil, like a prison, ruled by a Darklord who is both the master and prisoner of this domain. In order to escape, they'll have to defeat him. He takes to the air again, this time flying low, along the coast, north, until the lights in the distance of the first original Walker's Landing he found are in sight.
Angrily, the dragon saw the events clearly in his mind. Lawrence lusted for Sarah so badly she opted to leave. Desperate to keep her there, he blew up the ship from the mainland full of innocence, not realizing she was already on board. In his grief, he tried to kill himself, but instead the dark powers created him this purgatory and instilled him as the Darklord. And there he was, with some townsfolk dead ahead in the town square.
The enormous dragon becomes visible, slams into the ground. To a shriek of horror of the onlookers, he pins Lawrence under his massive dragon claw, speaking in his native draconic but using magic so those nearby could understand him.
Lawrence Swooks will have
Lawrence cries out for help, and then stops. All of the townspeople stop, dead in their tracks, paralyzed as if by magic.
Clever dragon, but not that clever.
Lawrence's twin sister, Lozen, replies.
It was in fact I who sunk that ship, knowing full well that Sarah was on it, so that my brother would move on. But his obsession persisted through her death. When I confessed my love and my crime to him, he was so distraught that he turned me in, his own flesh and blood. Once I was in custody, he killed himself right in front of me, out of guilt. And I lost the only man I'd ever loved. The town was burning me at the stake as punishment, but just as my sentence was being carried out at dawn, I heard a voice from the mists. It told me I'd have revenge on my executioners and get my brother back. Another chance for our love.
And now you have ruined yet another one of my attempts to attain that goal. If more are to trespass, I could use something like you to assist me.
Si, Dorigruf. Letoklo Wuxini Skentier Dut Tasil Diloax.
We shall see.
An enormous undead bronze dragon perches atop a massive onyx tower that rises high above the canopy of the forest, mist emanating from it like snakes slithering between the trunks of the forest for miles, ending at the perimeter of just one of the many oblivious Walker's Landing settlements that are found here. Darkness falls, wolves howl outside of town, but inside the warm tavern, spirits are high as people wait for rescue, and Lawrence longingly looks at the town doctor Sarah, while his loving twin sister Lozen gently strokes his back. The Darklord, Lozen Boudica. Well, what did you think of my Darklord Lozen and my Domain of Dread, Walker's Landing? Here she is, riding atop Astropothegon for the shelf. I think a campaign set in this domain would be really neat, as players could find multiple instances of the Walker's Landing, some in ruins, some in various states of survival. But let me know in the comments below what you thought of my story. Special thanks to Paint a Knife Viewer Knights Terrain for naming our Darklord today, and a big thanks to my friendly local gaming store, Phoenix Rising, for supplying me with that model. That was pretty cool to paint, and I had a lot of fun. The painting video will be released on Tuesday with my commentary. It's a Mantic vampire riding Undead Dragon miniature. If you want to watch that, it'll be out on Tuesday. Head on down to your friendly local gaming store and give miniature painting a try. Grab some brushes, some paints, some miniatures, and paint along with us here at Paint to Life. I'd be lying if I said no one's come forward and said they started painting as a result of this channel, so mission accomplished. Anyways, that's all I have for you this week. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel to help us grow. I'm GM Atank. We'll see you next time. Wash your hands, people. They are unable to leave no matter what. And whatever awful, terrible deed found them put in this place can't be rectified either. They're corrupt beyond redemption, and no solace can be found by them.